Hello. Today let's have a quick look at these two Grundig Super VHS machines that were donated to me. Now I didn't know Grundig made Super VHS machines, so these were a bit of a surprise. But actually the main mechanics in these turn out to be made by Panasonic. It's the Panasonic G-mechanism, which is a bit older than the sort of machines I'm used to working on. I tend to work on the K-mechanisms onwards. So let's hope the mechanics are in good order. Now, I understand that one of these had worked and one of them had been broken for some time, and I also understand that they fail when the internal battery goes inside these. It tends to cause them to not function. But we do have the benefit of the service manual, which is written in 3 languages, German, English and Italian, so it's a little bit sort of bulkier than it needs to be, but is really good because you get all the proper fold-out schematics that you don't tend to get quite so good if you have soft copies. And we do see the G mechanism, all the alignment information for the G mechanism. Let's hope we don't get involved in that. So initially, let's try to work out what these two machines do, and then have a look at this backup battery and see what else is wrong with them. First, I'll just quickly show you around one of the machines. This one, the front panel's fallen off, the sort of drop down panel. The other one, it's in good order. Around the back, we have 2 SCART sockets, 2 S-video, audio in and out, and a strange connector here. Which is marked audio and video in and out. It looks like maybe something's missing there. There should be a control panel, a connector panel there, or something. So that's interesting. Around the other side we have a slightly weird DIN connector. That looks like it might be for some kind of remote control. And what's that? Something which is marked in German that I don't understand. And then the aerial in and out connectors. We also seem to have control here, which may be for volume. It seems to be marked volume. So interesting connectors. What I don't like to see is captive power cables. Yuck, horrible. We also have the quite zany remote controls, and they would obviously be something we can look at later if we get the machine working. So let's see if either of these is in a position that it's worth working on. I'll plug it into my isolation transformer as usual. So we'll start with this top one. Let's see what we get when I power it up. Here goes. Did you hear that? You may not. Let me see if I can set you up to listen to that sound. That's the sound of a distressed power supply. So we know what would be wrong with that one, don't we? Okay, let's try the other one. If it does the same, then I've got to start with a power supply before I can do any other investigations. Here goes. Nothing at all. Totally dead, that one. Let's just confirm that. Nothing at all. Okay, so maybe power supply faults on both of them. The one that's making the chirping noise sounds like it's probably trying to work. So let's start by inspecting that one and see if we can find bad capacitors or similar. Right, let's see what's inside this one. It's clearly been apart before because the screws are coming off very easily. So a quick look inside, a fair amount of dust, a Panasonic G-mechanism, as you might have got on a VS-680 or similar. I mentioned that particular model number because I bought one of those from new. Okay, so we need to get into the power supply in there. Right, I've just unclipped this board and it's pretty obvious when you open it that, oh yes, it's a Grundig. Panasonic didn't build their equipment like this, with these connectors, and the first thing you see there is a Philips chip. Yes, it's Grundig alright. Lots of SAA series Philips chips there. It's even got an EEPROM for the firmware. And here's a battery which is quite likely to be bad, so we'll just check that battery. So just a lithium battery. and that's reading 8 millivolts, so that'll need replacing. I may bodge up a standard lithium cell rather than buy one of these relatively more expensive tagged ones, but that's a low priority. Really, we need to look at this power supply, but very unhelpfully it looks like the power supply is on the same board as a whole heap of the logic with millions of connectors and things on it. Wouldn't you have hoped they would have mounted it on its own power supply board? And it's not detachable power cable either. Not exactly a pleasant thing to work on. Let's have a look under this lid. Okay, power supply circuitry there. We'd really want to be looking at these capacitors. But how do you get access to any of this? It's so awful, I might have to read the manual. Well, the answer didn't jump out and hit me from the manual, so I'm a little unsure how to get this apart. I could have a look at going in from underneath, but apparently there is a frame memory underneath. It has sort of digital features. It's not exactly a time-based corrector, but part the way there. Right, this will be the frame memory under here. Hopefully that comes off relatively easily. Okay, with that swung out the way, we do gain access to the board that we were looking at earlier. And I think that can covers the power supply. Which leaves the question, how do we get this can out of the way? Is it just soldered on? Thing is, there's no visible soldering here, so I don't know how they would have assembled that. And looking on the top, there's no obvious way to release the metal can underneath. My best guess is that this frame is permanently attached, soldered onto the board, and that the lower one slips into this. It's pushed in with metal prongs, so I should just be able to pull it off. I do hope I'm right about that, because if I do it wrong I'll damage something. I have to show you something in the service manual here. The way they've done these is you can follow the tracks and the component IDs using these amazing semi-transparent prints. Wow, it's beautifully done, isn't it? But what I'd really appreciate from this manual is a bit of information on how to get the power supply apart. So we do have here the component layout for the power supply and the schematics, but not so much information on how to take it apart. However, looking at it, you know, this is mostly the primary side, and where we need to be looking at is the capacitors, which are on the other side of this housing. So, with the odd exception of that one, for example, most of the capacitors I need to look at are in there. Although it's not a pleasant thing to work on, I think I can get to the top side of the board there. You know what's going to happen when I start trying to desolder these capacitors, don't you? It's going to be board damage. I just can't get enough access there to really work on it, and when I pull on these, very limited room to pull on them as I'm desoldering the other side, I'm going to break the board. I'll try this one here. And I don't like desoldering a capacitor before testing it, because the act of desoldering it can alter its performance a lot. And that meter's absolutely fine, but would it have been any good when it was still on the board for that component? But is it practical to test all of the capacitors that way? Some of them are very hard to access. And the big difficulty being, if this was a self-contained power supply, I'd say fine, fix one power supply and you can work on the two machines with that. But it's not the way it is it? I have to work on this machine, dedicate myself to this machine, if I start on this one. Right, let's bodge up some CR2032 batteries, something like that. So here are the coin cells with tabs on them. Let's just desolder that. And indeed what's under the welded terminals is a CR2032, but I can't weld, I'm just going to have to solder, and that's not ideal. I'll have to solder quickly and with some flux, because this probably won't take solder naturally. No, I'm not going to be able to solder even a small amount of wire on one of these batteries, so I have to come up with another plan. Remembering of course that coin cells like this, that the terminals are the opposite to what you might expect. So this is plus 3 volts here, so we should see 3 volts between the large terminal and the small pointy terminal, 3 volts on this bodge up. This one with the bad power supply isn't going to make any difference, I'm sure, but maybe the other one that's completely dead, it will. But anyway, just to prove the point, let's plug this one in. It's making those strange squeaking power supply noises. I'll put this one together and try the 3 volt battery on the other one. Really got to get this can off, and I think I might be getting somewhere. I think you have to sort of squeeze some metal tabs on the inside of this heat sink. Aha! Oh, it's so awkward. We can get to the bottom of the power supply and check. Something looks a bit odd down there. Let's have a look at that with a microscope. So this is the power supply that's got the catastrophically blown fuse, and it's clearly had some work done on it. Oh dear. So that might be a difficult repair. So we have on this side of the board, we can see an 8-pin device. Let's have a look at the schematic. So that's IC355, that's clearly been replaced. Let's look at the top side of the board if we can, in that area. Well, maybe it's not been replaced, maybe it's just been worked on. Shall we look at that transistor T375? It may potentially be short circuit. Well, it doesn't appear to be short circuit. So something else may have caused the fuse to blow. Let's do a quick check, of course, of the bridge rectifier, because it's clearly not going to work if that's bad. Everything's so hard to find on this board. This looks like the bridge rectifier over here. Oh! I'm seeing a dead short across one of the bridge rectifier terminals. Let me show you that. Oh, just looking here at there's a bridge rectifier, and this is the mains smoothing capacitor, and just looking across the terminals of the bridge rectifier here, you know, that looks like a diode. Don't know exact pin out. There's another diode, and there's a short circuit. Most likely the bridge rectifier itself, do we think? So we'll pop that out and have a look. Okay, let's check these terminals of the rectifier again. Yes, indeed, short circuit. That would blow the fuse. There may be other faults, but we definitely have a blown rectifier. Well, I don't have a rectifier of exactly the right specs to hand, so I'll borrow the one out of this other machine temporarily and order some more in due course. So for now, I've replaced the defective rectifier with the one from the other machine, because I know that's exactly the right type. I have a 1 amp fuse in here rather than the 1.25. I'll order some more of those shortly, but that would be fine. So let's just see if we get any life at all. I haven't put the screening covers back yet. I'll do that if and when it turns out that the power supply runs. Let's plug it into the isolation transformer. Here goes. We had something bright on the display momentarily, and then it went dim. And now it says various gibberish on the display. But it's running! Oh, good! Let's put the screening cans back together and we can do some more testing. Okay, let's start by seeing if it runs mechanically. So it's... oh my goodness! Grundig CTI test build, it says. Kein Empfang auf Programm 1. And smoke. Let's just hope that's a capacitor. Let's get the lid off here and see if I can see what's smoking. I'm going to suspect it's one of the mains filter capacitors that's failed, though they don't visibly look bad. Let's have a closer look with the microscope. One of them feels warm. So I'm going to take both of those out. I've got to go into battle with this horrible screening can again. Yes, that's the one that failed. It's a 0.1 microfarad mains filter capacitor, but I'll obviously replace the other one as well. Okay, we've got the originals were 0.1s, now I've got 0.22s. That'll be absolutely fine. And these are safety rated components, X2 rated. Okay, another quick power up before I put the screening cans back. Yep, that seems to be working. The display is very dim though. You've seen in various places reefer branded capacitors which look similar to this have a tendency to explode, and you always have to replace them as a matter of course. I don't think these are reefer branded, but clearly they use a similar technology. Grundig CTI test build, Kein Empfang auf Programm 1. Let's see if the mechanism... well, that doesn't feel right. There's something wrong here. This doesn't feel right. No, something wrong. Now, if this was a K mechanism, I'd be a lot more at home than this earlier G type. It's not fully retracted in the cassette. Rather, the carriage is not fully retracted. You know, it should have done an initialize and ejected as part of the power-up procedure. Is it refusing to do anything because it's hung up about the fact it's trying to do a tuner setup? I doubt it, but we'll pop some batteries into the remote and just prove that's not the case. Well, the remote seems to be alive, but it's just coming up with this symbol in the top corner. Maybe that's just saying it's transmitting, so we'll see if we can use it. Also got to be careful, there's a 1 and 2, video 1 and 2, so you need to make sure that we're talking in the right code set. I'll try the other remote. Okay, it does the same. I'm going to press every single button in the hope that something does something. But I don't know if I should be in video 1 or video 2 mode. Is there a switch on here? It's taking notice. Some of the buttons are, some of the display segments are changing as I'm hammering buttons. Oh look, it's coming to colour now. More buttons. Look at that for remote control. On-off button up here. Does that do anything? Is there a switch somewhere to put it into that's in this test mode? Maybe at the back? Right, the remote is working because now I see that when I'm typing numbers on here, they are being reflected on the screen. You can see that's incredibly dim. And that's in video 1 mode. So, okay, that's one thing sorted out. But it's in test built, test card. How do we get it out of that? And it's saying there's no program assigned to channel 1. Well, we know that, I don't care. I just want you to get out of this silly mode. I'm sure these buttons should do something, whatever state that's in. So I think we actually have a deck fault, or some sort of power issue that's resulting in the deck not running. I see here that Grundig made a mistake. There's an actual error. It says SVHS on an S-video connector. It's nothing to do with SVHS, of course. That connector is used for many things, including high 8 and camcorders, DVDs, all sorts of things. Nothing to do with SVHS. It's an S-video connector. Separate luma chroma, not S as in Super VHS. I've been looking at the user manual, and it says if you get an F1 code, it means you've got some sort of deck fault. And I'm beginning to suspect that's the case. So I've turned the lights down a bit so we can see the very dim display. When you switch it on, it comes on with the firmware revision code, and that seems to be very bright. So let's switch it on again. And it's got, oh, it's actually F2. There's 099F. Are they error codes? What do you think? It's very dim, isn't it? So it's not F1, it's F2. But the deck seems to be completely dead. So I don't think there's anything I can do with the remote control or the front panel controls that are going to make any difference. So the question is then, if this has got a mechanical problem, what is going on, or a deck problem, or something that's causing the whole system to be dead here? And there's so much deadness going on in the deck that I'm beginning to suspect a power supply fault. So I think I'll have a look at the power supply voltages. I'll just power cycle it one more time. What comes up on the display? It just goes straight into that display when it powers up. There's nothing beforehand. Just straight into that. Let's do a quick check of power supply voltages if I can. And 10 should be at minus 27. Yep, they all look right. On pin 13 we should look for reset bar signal on pin 12 of A4. Yes, and if you power cycle it should go it should stay low slightly longer than when I switch it on. Yeah, I think that's right. So that's not ruled out the entire power supply, but it certainly indicates that things seem to be running properly. So why is there nothing at all on the deck? The deck is just, it's in some position where it's kind of not fully ejected. In fact, is it down? It's actually down. Yes. Worse than not fully ejected, it's actually down. And pressing CAS does not eject the tape. And anyway, when you power these up, I thought they spun the head for a moment, and we're not getting anything at all. And what does F2 mean? Not really that much information in the service manual. Okay, we're stopping there for now. I wonder whether either of these machines is worth any more time and effort. What do you think? They're quirky, somewhat over-engineered, as is the way with Grundig, but are they worth a great deal more effort? Because it's not clear whether the frame store and digital tricks functions includes a time-based corrector, i.e. rebuild sync pulses, just as a matter of course, or maybe it doesn't do that sort of function. So it might be that this could be a great deal of effort for a machine that doesn't perform any better than, say, Panasonic VS-680, and I've got one of those already. It's quite low mileage as well because it's one I bought from new. So what do you think? Is it worth spending more time and work on these, and what would you do next? This machine, the other machine, or neither? I'll put up a poll down below. In the meantime, I'll do plenty more content on these perhaps and other audio and video equipment in the near future. Bye for now.